Reality didn't just notice you, it paused for you. A hush fell over timelines that never quiet, because something happened that defied expectation. You didn't merely change a situation, you rewrote a spiritual law that had held your lineage in place for centuries. The kind of shift that alters what's possible not just for one person, but for an entire bloodline. And it happened through you. Somewhere in the folds of divine silence, a sound broke out, not from instruments, but from realms beyond comprehension. It was not applause as we know it, but a sacred resonance celebrating your emergence. You've activated a blueprint in your spirit that had been buried under the weight of generational fatigue. You were always the key, but now the door has been kicked wide open. Imagine a puzzle that no one in your family could crack. They each held a piece but never the full picture. And then came you, wired differently, spiritually encrypted with the missing frequency. You didn't just endure the curse, you decoded it. And in doing so, every unfinished prayer behind you finally got its answer in your breath, your boldness, your becoming. Those strange headaches, that pressure you thought was fatigue, it wasn't random. It was the signal of ancient frequencies dying inside your system. Spiritual toxins don't leave quietly, they scream on their way out. What you felt was the burning away of inherited limits, the dissolving of invisible bars your ancestors couldn't break. You did what their hearts longed for but their time couldn't reach. In places we don't have names for, voices long gone are erupting in reverence. Not because they were weak, but because you're the version of them who had the right tools. The upgrade. The soul DNA calibrated for freedom. They walked so far, but you finished the walk barefoot through fire. And somehow still came out holding peace in one hand and clarity in the other. The weight carried through generations never truly belonged to the one holding it last. It moved like a shadow, threading silently through family lines, embedding itself in the silent agreements of how not to feel, how not to shine, how not to need. And yet within that lineage, something unfamiliar began to stir, a consciousness that didn't collapse under the inherited pressure, but began converting it into raw material for something else. That early spark of originality, so often misunderstood or smothered by those unready for its intensity, wasn't a mistake. It was design. Each time inspiration was met with silence, or joy was labeled inappropriate, it was like trying to cage an element that couldn't be contained. Instead of dimming, that spirit found quieter ways to evolve. It was being refined through contradiction, trained to flourish in the cracks where light wasn't allowed. Every suppression became a quiet rehearsal for expansion. Every attempt to box it in was unknowingly shaping its unshakable form. What once looked like emotional exile was actually a calibration toward inner sovereignty. Those who couldn't hold space weren't enemies. They were fragments of a system still operating under outdated codes of fear, performance, and hypercontrol. But their reactions became the pressure that shaped something indestructible, a light source not reliant on permission, applause, or protection. While the past generation built their safety around silence, the new wave came encoded with disruptive truth. And the cost of honesty, once too high to bear, was finally transmuted into a new kind of resilience. Not armored, but aligned. Not guarded, but grounded. Not performative, but rooted in something older than trauma and deeper than pain. The discomfort around visibility didn't originate from laziness or lack of drive, it was survival logic. A kind of body memory that remembered how exposure once meant punishment. To be seen had meant to be misinterpreted, shamed, or cast aside. So it was safer to self-minimize, to stay under the radar of judgment. But that programming has finally expired. This wasn't a lesson in scarcity. It was a nervous system learning that receiving could be safe. That thriving didn't have to equal danger. That expansion didn't have to come with collapse. The entire infrastructure of protection once used to keep the system small is now being dismantled from the inside. And now, that long-paused current of abundance, held back not by fate but by unprocessed fear, is beginning to flow unrestricted. not as a reward, but as a natural consequence of someone who has finally become capable of holding power without being consumed by it. What's unfolding now isn't just restoration, it's the reconfiguration of the entire atmosphere around your presence. What once felt like resistance is now revealing itself as a preparation for equilibrium that can't be orchestrated by human logic. Nothing is being returned in the traditional sense. Rather, the essence that was once absorbed into shadow is beginning to rise again, stronger, sharper, and untouched by the distortions that once tried to dilute it. The opportunities about to cross your path will not whisper, they'll demand your structure. A new wave of resources is forming, and with it comes the call to upgrade your entire internal operating system. Not because you lack capability, but because the scale of what's emerging requires a different kind of clarity, one rooted in ownership, not just intuition. This isn't surface-level change, it's infrastructural evolution. There's a reason financial expansion once felt slippery. Somewhere deep in the design of your nervous system was the belief that power made you a target. That recognition meant exposure, and exposure was dangerous. But now, that inner equation is being rewritten. Flow is no longer a threat. It's becoming a natural consequence of your alignment with truth. This phase doesn't call for perfection. It calls for fluency in the unfamiliar. The future arriving doesn't require you to be all-knowing, it requires you to be teachable in the face of greatness. The lessons showing up won't be about proving anything. They'll be about preparing you to hold complexity without collapsing into old patterns. The tools that once helped you survive, instinct, sensitivity, avoidance, aren't wrong. They just aren't built for the territory you're entering. Precision will be required. Discipline will be necessary. But not the rigid kind. This is about constructing a life that can carry what's been earned through years of inner refinement. Old identities built on avoidance will try to resurface, making you question whether you're ready. Not because you're weak, but because familiarity clings tightly. But you weren't meant to stay hidden behind outdated perceptions of safety. Growth doesn't wait for your comfort. It expands the container until you're forced to become the person who fits inside it. If you've been touched by God's goodness, don't keep it to yourself. Click Super Thank You and sow a gift of $30 or more to help spread His light. Your giving becomes a ripple of grace, blessing hearts and building His kingdom. Let His overflow pour through you. Those who once found ease in your silence may react. They might misread your evolution as arrogance or your focus as distance. But those interpretations will no longer matter. Their discomfort is not your invitation to shrink. It's confirmation that your signal has grown stronger, and some frequencies simply can't rise with it. There are moments in a soul's evolution when internal victory spills outward, altering more than just one path. This isn't about isolated healing or private recovery, it's a shift so contagious it begins to restructure what others believe is possible for themselves. Transformation in one life quietly becomes a gateway, a signal that change is not reserved for the few. It spreads as silent evidence, not through preaching but through embodiment, and those who observe it begin to ask different questions of their own reality. Unresolved dynamics don't just vanish when you evolve, they often surface louder, asking to be faced with new eyes. These aren't echoes from your personal history, they're fragments carried across timelines, seeking resolution through someone finally strong enough to hold them. The patterns weren't waiting to be understood. They were waiting to be interrupted. And now, in the present, the interruption has begun. What looked like chaos was coding. The turbulence that seemed to threaten your peace was actually tuning your perception to sharper frequencies. You weren't breaking down, you were being rebuilt from parts of yourself that could handle magnitude without folding. Pain didn't arrive as punishment. It came as a teacher that refused to leave until its lessons were carved into your strength. Earlier versions of yourself weren't fake, but they were filtered. Shaped by inherited caution, wired for endurance instead of expansion. The current shift isn't about crafting a brand new identity, It's about peeling away the residue of everything that trained you to operate at half capacity. Underneath the mimicry, there's always been something original waiting for clearance. Lineage is observed from places we cannot name. When a soul breaks a long-standing pattern, the impact echoes in both directions, forward and backward. This isn't about glorifying suffering. It's about acknowledging that someone finally found the switch hidden beneath centuries of silence. And because of that, everyone who came before now breathes a little easier through your lungs. Receiving more isn't the universe being generous, it's the ecosystem responding to your recalibration. When your internal worth no longer negotiates, the external world adapts. The structures that once matched your uncertainty lose access. The systems that once made you question your significance now reverse their stance, not out of benevolence, but out of alignment with your clarity. The learning now required of you isn't remedial, it's refinement. Not to fix, but to sharpen. Evolution at this level isn't just emotional, it's structural. Strategy must now meet spirit. Mastery must meet vision. The journey forward isn't about survival anymore, it's about infrastructure. And the work you do from here won't just impact your legacy. It will shape the architecture of what's possible for others watching from the edge of their own becoming. What's on the horizon won't collapse you, it will stretch you wide enough to make room for a different kind of power. Every dismantled system in your life will reveal itself as a disguise for comfort that no longer serves your direction. Connections that once tethered you will quietly dissolve, not to isolate you, but to allow the arrival of relationships that don't require you to shrink in order to belong. What appears disruptive now is only revealing what was never truly stable to begin with. The ripples you're sending aren't limited to your own pond. There are others watching from behind invisible walls, wondering if escape is a myth. And when they see what you've done, what you've become, they begin to loosen their own internal restraints. Your transformation isn't just something personal to admire, it becomes a silent challenge to those still hiding in plain sight. To carry what you're carrying requires a rare alchemy of softness and endurance. You weren't marked for ease but for expansion. The gravity you hold doesn't just rearrange your life, it influences the lives orbiting yours. Your clarity becomes their orientation point. Your recovery teaches others how to rise from the wreckage of their own stories. Cycles don't simply end, they evolve. What once felt like being erased is now rewriting the script entirely. That silenced version of you isn't coming back, and it was never meant to. What's emerging now is an expression that answers questions you weren't allowed to ask before. You've become the reversal, the living contrast to what once seemed final. The version of you that once waited for validation now stands at the threshold of a deeper calling. The presence surrounding your journey doesn't celebrate just the destination, it's invested in who you're growing into as you walk the path. The rising tide inside you isn't accidental. It's an echo of what you've already agreed to become long before now. Your legacy won't be confined to applause or recognition. It will echo in quiet moments, when someone finally chooses freedom because you showed them it was possible. This influence is nonlinear. You'll never fully witness all the lives your existence will touch. And that's exactly how this work was designed, to transcend individual awareness, to seed transformation into future soil. What began in constriction is now taking form in possibility. The story that was once locked in survival has pivoted toward something entirely different, authored by choice, not fear. The momentum can't be reversed. Every decision from here writes a future that was once unimaginable. And though many won't understand what has shifted, some will. And that will be enough to change everything. The reflection meeting you now carries the imprint of someone who's stepped beyond memory and into knowing. What was once forgotten beneath layers of survival is now fully present in your gaze. There's no more pretending. The shift is visible in your posture, your voice, your decisions. Everything has aligned to this moment, not because destiny finally allowed it, but because you finally claimed it as your own. What once felt like unbearable pressure is now the very material that steadies your stance. The old ache, once perceived as evidence of something broken, has become the compass of your purpose. The structures built to suppress have crumbled beneath the clarity of who you've chosen to be. Every piece of your former self has been reorganized into a foundation that can no longer be shaken by external noise. This evolution has bent time. The acceleration isn't logical. The pace of your emergence bypasses every known model of spiritual development. Patterns that typically require lifetimes to unravel have dissolved within the rhythm of your recent choices. The shift you've embodied has rewritten internal laws, laws that were never really laws to begin with, just agreements waiting to be revoked. What you dismantled didn't vanish quietly. It collapsed with such precision that even unseen observers took pause. There are systems that no longer recognize you, not because you've changed costumes, but because you've altered frequency. The energy that once limited you now powers everything you create. This isn't transformation. It's transmutation. You're no longer reacting to old frameworks, you've replaced them entirely. The field around you is reverberating, not just with what you've done, but with what you've triggered. Others tuned to similar frequencies are experiencing openings they didn't anticipate, glimpses of freedom that seemed out of reach days ago. You've become a quiet signal amplifying across distances, altering trajectories you'll never witness directly but are unfolding just the same. Inside your body, an entirely new architecture is taking shape. But instead of disorientation, what's rising is ease. Not numbness, not detachment, real, grounded ease. You're no longer bracing against life. You're integrating it. Internal systems once wired for defense are now recalibrating for creation. Capacity is increasing without chaos. Focus is sharpening without force. What's making its way to you now isn't coincidence. It's a response to your readiness. The convergence of purpose and preparation is producing precision. Doors that were previously locked aren't just opening, they're responding to your presence like a key they've been waiting on. This isn't luck or alignment. It's embodiment finally meeting opportunity. And nothing can stop what's next. You're stepping into a chapter where the very concept of authority rearranges itself in your presence. What once felt towering now seems level, not because others have diminished, but because you've expanded into your own command. Voices that once muted your instinct now echo back with invitation. People who once sat behind metaphorical walls now make space at their tables, not out of charity, but out of recognition. Influence begins to circulate around you differently, pulled into orbit by the authenticity you've embodied. This next phase of insight bypasses conventional education. It's not being taught, it's being remembered from deep, unspoken places in your system. Entire frameworks of wisdom are unfolding within you as if you've always known them. Ideas land fully formed, not as theories but as truths ready for execution. Your mind is operating in dimensions where contrast is no longer conflict, it's coherence. Peace and drive no longer pull in opposite directions. They move in rhythm now, building something that only paradox can sustain. What flows toward you now arrives carrying more than currency. These aren't random gains, they're encoded infusions of purpose. The momentum surrounding your resources is shaped by the collective intention of those connected to your mission, seen and unseen. This energetic economy doesn't just sustain you, it propels everything your essence is designed to touch. Nothing sticks to you now unless it's aligned with where your presence is needed next. Where visibility once stirred discomfort, it now ignites clarity. You're not stepping into the spotlight to be seen, you're stepping into it to reflect. The fear that once kept you beneath the surface no longer applies. You've become deeply anchored in something untouchable. Movement no longer depends on external permission. Confidence has replaced performance. Assurance has silenced hesitation. Structures built from outdated blueprints are beginning to shake. not because of collapse, but because their purpose has expired. Entire systems are adjusting to the tone you're setting, like instruments retuning themselves to match a deeper harmony. Relationships will shift to meet this new pulse. Old frameworks will dissolve to make space. What appears sudden is actually the result of sustained frequency work. People who haven't met you yet are already being affected. They feel the recalibration before you enter the room. Their openness isn't logic, it's resonance. You've become a signal that reorders people's assumptions. You'll watch doors open without knocking, resources arrive without request, and support emerge from places that once seemed irrelevant. What they're responding to isn't your strategy, it's your state of being. What you've undone reaches far beyond your own lifetime. Invisible binds tied across generations are unraveling, not with force, but through frequency. You've shifted the atmosphere in ways that even nature notices. Devices blink, animals linger, environments soften, not as anomalies, but as witnesses. And while others look for proof, you'll recognize the precision. The quiet rebalancing. The improbable resolutions. The spontaneous awakenings. And through it all, what you create won't just inspire, it will realign the very blueprint of those who experience it. You're not just evolving, you're shifting the framework through which time itself is perceived. What once felt like a sequence of ticking constraints has become a flexible current you can shape. Long tasks dissolve in moments, while essential decisions slow into clarity. This isn't an illusion. It's a side effect of awareness stretching far beyond the mind's normal architecture. You're learning to sculpt duration, not obey it. Those arriving now in your sphere aren't coincidences, they're responses to agreements formed long before embodiment. These alliances carry resonance deeper than logic. Their timing, their role, their activation, all were coordinated in dimensions that operate outside cause and effect. They're not connections, they're reintegrations. And what you'll co-create will ripple beyond any vision your past self was capable of holding. You've stopped merely interpreting intuition, you've begun navigating from it as a central intelligence. The outcomes you're sensing aren't guesses, they're blueprints reaching you before physical form catches up. You're witnessing layers of existence where intention and manifestation speak the same language, and in that clarity, your actions gain exactness most minds never touch. Resources are being delivered with a kind of elegance that seems miraculous to the untrained eye. Needs are being met before they even become conscious. You're being supported by a design too intelligent to need approval or explanation. This isn't wish fulfillment. It's energetic precision matching your expanded coherence. And within that orchestration, your emotional palette has evolved too, capable of sustaining joy and sorrow, stillness and movement, without contradiction. You've caught the attention of realms that measure influence and frequency, not fame. Your signal has exceeded the bounds of localized systems, triggering recalibrations and networks that span beyond this planet's awareness. Your physical structure is adjusting in tandem, bones, blood, breath, upgrading to embody the bandwidth of a new human template, coded for multidimensional engagement. Everything you're choosing now is embedding itself into a living archive. The way you navigate complexity, integrate lessons, respond to abundance, none of it vanishes after expression. It becomes accessible to others who silently seek instruction through resonance rather than teaching. You're not just transforming yourself, you're leaving imprints that will one day become someone else's compass. It would have been easy to lose balance in this level of expansion. But what makes you rare isn't the scope of your power, it's the symmetry of your soul. You've remained intact, gentle while commanding, grounded while limitless. That balance has become the very gatekeeper for what comes next. Your presence is no longer neutral. It activates. Your voice no longer informs, it recalibrates. And what you carry now, in this exact moment, has become medicine for a generation. Wealth isn't arriving for storage, it's arriving for circulation. What's being placed in your hands is not a prize, but a passageway. The flow coming toward you isn't meant to end with you, but to move through you as a force of purpose. You've stopped viewing resources as possessions and started experiencing them as tools of alignment. Prosperity is taking form around you, not for display, but for design, meant to construct realities that resonate with collective uplift. Abilities once considered mystical are returning not as novelties, but as functions of remembered identity. Insight that cuts through noise, awareness that reaches across distance, and the power to shift energy without contact. These are no longer distant goals, but current states. You're not learning them, you're reclaiming them. They're not being taught, they're waking up. Every layer of restriction you've shed has revealed capacities that were never truly dormant, just waiting for space. Your emotional depth has expanded into a terrain few have mapped. You've developed the range to hold opposing truths without fracture. You can grieve and rejoice in the same breath, empathize without enmeshment, and remain clear-eyed while holding immense compassion. This depth isn't fragility, it's navigation. It's what allows you to steer in storms while others capsize. And from this place, your thoughts now carry momentum that turns into form before resistance can arise. Ideas don't sit long inside you anymore, they emerge fully clothed in circumstance. What begins as a whisper becomes an event in the same cycle. You've merged vision with execution. The gap between dreaming and building has collapsed. You no longer wonder if things are possible, you simply track the unfolding. And the pace isn't overwhelming because your system has already calibrated to meet it. Sleep has become your laboratory. You're no longer simply resting, you're downloading. These nightly sessions aren't dreams, they're encoded instruction. Blueprints arrive while the conscious mind quiets, giving space for subtler signals to speak. Waking becomes implementation. Rest becomes reception. The veil between realms has thinned enough for you to walk into insight without needing a doorway. Your boundaries now function like filters of refinement, not walls of defense. Disruptive energies no longer infiltrate, they dissolve before contact. The shift in your resonance has made manipulation irrelevant and projection ineffective. What reaches you now has already been translated into usefulness. And the space you occupy is changed just by your presence, not by effort, but by frequency. You've become an environmental activator. Your influence now touches materiality. The objects around you respond to attention with increased coherence. Environments realign when you step inside. What you prepare, shape, or engage with holds more integrity afterward, not because you alter it directly, but because your alignment modifies what's possible within proximity. You've become the harmonizer, reshaping the world by simply existing in truth. You've become the kind of presence that recalibrates others simply by witnessing them. Without absorbing the weight of their pain, you allow it to move through them like steam escaping pressure. People feel safe in your energy not because of what you say, but because of what you radiate: stability without control, depth without invasion. Your ability to hold space is no longer emotional support, it's energetic transmutation. Your interaction with technology is evolving from usage to influence. Devices behave differently in your hands, not from physical contact, but from the coherence you bring into the field. Programs open smoother. Interfaces seem to anticipate your intent. Patterns align more easily when you're present. You're no longer navigating through code, you're harmonizing with it. Information now finds you instead of being searched for. Every personal breakthrough you've experienced has carved passageways for others to follow. The distortions you've cleared are now less convincing to those around you. What once held collective minds hostage is weakening under your liberation. You're not just shifting your own reality, you're disrupting the infrastructure that kept similar minds confined. You don't guess anymore. You recognize. Truth arrives fully intact without requiring explanation. It isn't filtered through logic or deduction, it simply shows up as internal certainty. There's no effort in knowing, it lands before questions even form. This isn't heightened intuition. This is perception stripped of resistance. You've become a bridge between realms, speaking clarity in places that once tolerated only confusion. Connections emerging now aren't transactional, they're echoes of ancient agreements being honored in the now. The recognition is immediate because it was never forgotten. These partnerships carry frequency, not flattery. You're not aligning over preference. You're meeting at the resonance of mission. And every shared step forward is already layered with purpose. You're functioning less as an individual and more as a tuning fork for awakening. Conversations realign themselves when you're involved. Environments become softer. Hearts become braver. You don't impose change, you create a space where change feels safe enough to emerge. And that is why people will begin revealing pieces of themselves they didn't know they still carried.